Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
And welcome to a very special edition of Lost in Science. It is the Lost in Science fiction edition of Lost in Science this week. Thanks for joining us. My name is Claire, and it's Halloween.
It is. Well, it's the lead up to Halloween, isn't it?
It's around Halloween-ish.
It's close enough.
Yeah.
It is Halloween-esque. It is that time of year anyway. The time of year where we take some of our favourite science fiction films and we dissect them and make them not fun anymore.
That's right. Is everything we're good at is making things not fun.
Is that our sole purpose? No.
No, we take a good look at the science fiction films and we look at the science behind them.
Exactly.
Or lack thereof.
And today on the show, I'm going to be looking at a movie that is 45 years old called Soylent Green. And there is a secret of Soylent Green. I'm going to talk about that secret and why some startup Silicon Valley types in California have decided to name their product Soylent. Stu, what do you have for us?
Well, if you're going to be talking about a 45-year-old movie, I'm going to have to one-up you there and talk about a 50-year-old movie.
Love it.
Yeah, one of my favourite all-time science fiction films is 2001, A Space Odyssey. It is a classic and it's an epic and it's a very confusing ending.
You know, it's sort of a confusing starting as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of, there's about 3 movies rolled into there, maybe even 4 to be honest. But it is also really amazingly influential and had huge effects on real world technology and all sorts of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about that.
And Chris, what do you have for us today?
Well, I am going to take concept of this episode and just tear movies apart. But in particular,
tear them apart with your tiny little
yes, I'm going to be picking on, well, mostly Jurassic Park, but other movies. Just that common trope in a lot of science fiction movies where the monsters, they can't get you if you don't move. They don't know you're there if you don't move.
Oh, classic T-Rex.
Just stay still.
Yeah, stay still.
And they just walk past.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's a fairly common one. I see it a lot in Doctor Who, and it bugs me. So I want to find out, is that realistic? You know, could the T-Rex detect you? And are there animals that only detect you if you move? And should you be worried about them?
Well, I'm looking forward to knowing what I should do when I encounter a T-Rex at the end of that laneway some fateful night in the future. On with the show. So I'm taking us back to a movie that asks the question, what is the secret of Soylent Green?
Can we just say it?
Yeah.
It's people.
Okay.
Didn't wait long there, did you?
Didn't wait long. Okay, all right. Let me give you a rundown of the film Soylent Green, starring everyone's favourite gun
Rabid
lover,
NRA.
Charlton Heston. Stu's already spoiled it, but yes, more spoilers ahead. So it's 2022, which is only 4 years away, and industrialisation has resulted in overpopulation, pollution, and global warming due to the greenhouse effect.
This all sounds unlikely to me.
It all sounds fairly plausible to me, Chris. You're living in denial over there. Well, okay, so there are 40 million people living in New York City, and everyone is scraping by on rations produced by the Soylent Corporation. And their latest product is Soylent Green, a green wafer that contains high-energy plankton, because that's the only thing that'll grow anymore. Plankton. Apparently it's plankton. That's what they're telling them anyway.
And isn't it suggested that they were soylent because they were using soy and lentils to begin with, but then they couldn't get them to grow anymore, so now they're onto the plankton. Yeah. Enter Charlton Heston as a hardboiled detective on the case of a mysterious murder of a board member from this Soylent Corporation. Charlton enlists the help of an elderly detective to start investigating, and what they uncover is that Soylent Green is not made from high-energy plankton at all.
In fact, there are no plankton left in the oceans. Scandal.
That's a big shock.
Yeah, it is a shock. Meanwhile, the haggard old detective finds out that Soylent Green is potentially made from human remains.
He was one day away from retirement, I'm sure.
Which is the only known protein, and is so disgusted with the situation, he checks himself into an assisted death clinic.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
So isn't there's suicide booths in this film, isn't there?
So he checks himself in to this suicide. It's not a booth, it's more like a clinic.
You're thinking of Futurama.
Yeah, I am.
And they ask him a whole lot of questions about what he likes, and then he gets to trip out on imagining green forests and extinct animals and all the nature that he hasn't seen in years, and dies. Meanwhile, Charlton Heston jumps on a truck carrying all the euthanized bodies all the way to the Soylent Green factory, and he witnesses the dead bodies on a conveyor belt being turned into Soylent Green.
Including his former colleague?
Including his former colleague.
You are basically telling us the whole movie here, Claire.
At which point he screams,
Soylent Green is people.
Yeah.
Nice acting there, Stu.
Nice screaming there, Stu.
Yeah.
I'm not going to scream.
All right, so let's divide the science fact from the science fiction. Now, first of all, it's only 5 years away.
Yeah, but to be fair, 2001 was 17 years ago.
That's true. That's true. But we've already encountered aliens and
I went to the moon the other week.
Yeah, exactly.
On a business.
So overpopulation, the greenhouse effect, overfishing. These are all very current issues. It's not total environmental degradation. We're not eating ourselves or each other yet.
Yep, and New York is very different to what it was in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Yes. So for some context, this film came out around the same time as Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which kick-started the environmental movement. And it was also not long after the founding of the Environmental Protection Agency. So there was the signing of the Clean Air Act, which meant that urban air used to be a lot more polluted than it is nowadays. So, it was much more of an issue back then than it is now.
Acid rain and stuff was like a big concern, all those kind of things.
That's right. But obviously the most fascinating part of the film is the idea of the state turning us all into cannibals, which is pretty terrifying. But if you think about the ecosystem food pyramid, you've got the primary producers on the bottom, and then you've got, then the vegetarians, and then all the way up to probably humans at the top. So it doesn't really work when you think about it. And
you lose energy at every level up you go. Every trophic level you go up, you lose some energy. So you can't sustain a population feeding on themselves.
No, but it is a good way to deal with overpopulation.
Well, possibly.
Possibly. So humans are warm-blooded. We maintain our body temperature by moving around. But we end up spending so much of our energy on maintaining our body temperature that very little goes into producing biomass. And we're very slow-growing and, very inefficient from an energy perspective. So we're probably a bad choice in terms of a sustainable food supply.
But if it's all you got.
But if it's all you've got, and it would solve overpopulation in a pretty short amount of time, because people as calories can support so few other people that everyone would just die off very, very quickly. Anyway, this whole idea of Soylent Green hasn't stopped a California startup company developing and marketing a product that they have named Soylent. This is supposed to be a total full meal supplement, so something that you're supposed to eat for breakfast, lunch and dinner as a replacement for your meals. Soylent. You just add water to this powder and then you drink it.
What colour is it?
It's like a grey green. No, it's more of a beige.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Soylent beige.
Yeah. So its ingredients Soylent beige. Its ingredients include water, like maltodextrin, soy protein, oil, rice starch.
Does it have lentils in it?
No, it doesn't. But it does have human remains.
It does.
Okay, no, it doesn't have human remains. That was just a joke. But yeah, Soylent, it was developed by a software engineer who just wanted to drink something at his desk while he coded all day and all night.
And peed in a cup.
And he wanted to be as efficient and environmentally conscious as possible. So surely keeping the human population down is probably one of the best ways to be both efficient and sustainable at the same time. So who knows what the future holds for Soylent Beige.
Listen to me, Hatcher. You gotta tell them Soylent Green is people! We've gotta stop them somehow!
You're listening to Lost in Science, and as I said before, I am talking about those movie monsters, particularly certain dinosaurs, that can't see you if you don't move. Now, I think actually this is it's a good trope because it's sort of that childhood fear, when you're hiding in the bed. And
if you hide under the covers, the monsters can't get you because they can't see you.
Which, spoiler alert, they did in, I think, the latest Jurassic World movie.
Spoiler alert? I haven't seen that one.
Okay, sorry.
Came
Get
out
a wriggle on.
Yeah. Anyway, the question is this realistic? Does this actually happen in the real world? Well, look, now we can't say for certain how T-Rexes worked, how they hunted, how their eyes worked. There are some thoughts about that, but before I get to that, let's look at some existing animals to see if this is a thing that happens in the animal kingdom, as it were.
So we've got to assume that we're talking about animals that have eyes.
Yeah.
And can see normally.
Yeah, we're talking about
around,
and we're talking about predators in particular. Yeah. Now, there's some obvious things to point out here. Yes, definitely things moving make them easier to see.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know we live in the world when things move, they're kind of easier to see. And when you think about camouflage, like if you are pretending to be part of a tree, for instance, helps to not move. So, it's not moving is a strategy of hiding, clearly. But are there animals that can only see movement? Okay, so there are some documented studies on the common toad, Bufo. This is where seems to be a lot of this has come from. This is measuring their sensitivity to movement. So frogs and toads will mostly pick on moving things. Now, there's a German scientist, Jörg Peter Evert, who studied, looked at the neurons inside the toad's brain and found that certain neurons fired when a target is moving, like a worm or something that toads eat. And supposedly this is because the toads have fixed eyes. So for like humans and many other animals, our eyes do something called saccades, where they're constantly darting around and scanning the environment. This is so we can focus on, we can see the whole kind of world that we're looking at. Whereas toads, their eyes are more fixed. They can't do this. So they need to turn their head and focus on something. So they need to be able to detect movement quickly so that they can focus on it and identify it and narrow in on it. They're not exactly... Can't say they're blind to things that don't move. They just rely a lot on movement to detect their prey. Now, we can't say whether T-Rexes had a similar kind of thing.
Well, in Jurassic Park, didn't they recombine the dino DNA with the frog amphibious DNA?
Look, there's perhaps a get out there. I'm going to say that is stretching a bit because, again, the frogs and toads weren't totally blind to things not moving. But also, T-Rexes, their skull shape seems to give them a really good field of vision. They look like they were designed for eyes. Plus, they had other senses as well. Like they had large olfactory bulbs in their brain. So they probably had a very good sense of smell. And
so they could smell you before they see you.
Yeah, and this is one of the key points about predators. Like if you're a predator, then you evolve what you need to hunt. Yeah. You're not going to just suddenly lose your eyesight because you kind of need it to hunt. Most of them do have good eyesight. Even those that hunt in the dark have good eyesight. Like lions, for instance, they will often hunt at night. And the reason they do that is not, it's mostly because their prey can't see them. They're basically using their advantage to be able to see better at night to be able to hunt things that don't see as well.
There is a school of thought around T-Rexes that they weren't actually predators, but they were scavengers. They were just big scavengers, and that's why they have such a developed olfactory brain part.
So they could smell a dead animal from a long way off.
Yeah, so they could smell a dead animal from way off.
Well, I know there is some debate about that. I'm actually going to come back to that because I want to look at another animal that hunts at night, namely the owl. Okay, so barn owls, like the Tyto alba, can actually hunt in pitch blackness. These experiments have been done, and they just use sound to hunt. They actually have their left ear hole is higher up than their right. So you know how like we can detect using our stereo binaural hearing, we can detect, where
direction.
Things are. Yeah. By having one ear hole higher than the other, they can actually detect in a vertical plane as well.
Oh,
so they've got 3-dimensional directional detection.
Wow. They do.
Wow.
They do. We have to tilt our heads to do the same thing. Whew, what an inconvenience.
What a hassle.
Yeah. But, the owls also have really good eyesight, and, they will use both sight and sound when they're available. They will use what they need to find things. What I believe they don't have very good is a sense of smell, because when you are trying to find a small mouse from a few hundred meters away,
you don't need it.
Smell is not going to be very useful if your strategy is basically go really fast and pounce on it. Smell is not going to help you. Vultures, though, are a bird that does have a good sense of smell, and they are scavengers. They can smell the dead things. Maybe the T-Rex was like the vulture. Maybe that's one of the theories for that. But anyway, yeah, this all prompted me to wonder, are there any animals that do only use sound? Like, for instance, another movie, A Quiet Place. Have you seen that one?
No.
It was a scary movie, came out, that is directed by and starring Jim from The Office. No?
Oh, okay.
John Krasinski. Well, so these were like aliens that could only detect sound. They had incredibly good hearing, so they had to be completely quiet. It's actually a very tense movie to watch because most of the movie is very quiet. And anyone rustling, there's some kids in the row in front of me who are rustling their chips bags, and they were annoying. Anyway, but on Earth, you mostly find blind animals in places where there is no light. So like in caves or at the bottom of the ocean. Now, some of these, of course, are predators, but their prey is also blind. So it's basically the even ground. So I guess if one of these creatures came to the surface, or maybe they came from another planet where there was very little light, perhaps they would be like these monsters. But it's actually a fairly rare thing. But, just looking at these blind predators, I want to give a bit of a shout out to my favourite, the star-nosed mole. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of the star-nosed mole?
Yeah.
Condylura cristata. It's a small North American mole that has like this fleshy tendrils on its nose.
Yeah, 22. Looks like a star.
Yeah.
22 tendrils.
22 pink fleshy appendages. Oh, goodness. And they're constantly twitching and scanning its environment. And when they touch something, it reacts and grabs like something that might be edible. Apparently, they can react in about 8 milliseconds, which the Guinness Book of Records gave them the prize for the fastest forager.
Wow.
What do they do when they touch it? They grab it with their tendrils?
I think they just, with their mouth or something?
It's very close to their mouth.
It is very close
to their mouth, yeah. So apparently they're because, there's part of the brain is used essentially for touch sensing. They have like a very enlarged part of the brain for touch sensors. Much like we have an enlarged lobe for vision, they've got a similar kind of thing for touch. So it shows how the brain adapts to whatever sensors you're using. Anyway, T-Rexes weren't like star-nosed moles, I guess is what I'm saying. So look, what I'm saying is it is possible for some animals to only respond to sound or to movement, but it's quite rare in nature. So I think it's unlikely in the T-Rex, and I don't think it should be such a common trope necessarily in monsters across the whole sci-fi multiverse.
Hey! Ian, freeze! Get the cat!
One of my all-time favourite science fiction movies turns 50 this year, which is slightly older than me. And I think it stands as one of the better hard science fiction movies in history, but also one of the most influential. And I'm talking about 2001, A Space Odyssey. Stanley Kubrick, you probably heard the name, pretty visionary director, and made a whole lot of interesting sort of groundbreaking films in various genres. He didn't sort of stick to sci-fi. He was all over the place.
This was quite an early film for him, though, in his catalogue.
Yeah, in his career. He actually did a lot of technical pioneering in filmmaking too. He developed special lenses, for example, that allowed him to shoot scenes in the low light of candles. So he made a film called Barry Lyndon, and he wanted to be able to film by candlelight, and there was no such lens in the world, so he just invented one.
And he also filmed this film in 70mm film, right?
Yeah.
Which is much, much wider than you would normally see on film. It was
absolutely. It was really high standard, but that's because he wanted to make it look amazing. So he wrote a letter to science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke after discovering they had a mutual friend. Supposedly they were talking about telescopes. and he used that as an excuse to write Arthur C. Clarke a letter. And he proposed collaborating on a screenplay for what Kubrick called, the proverbial really good science fiction movie, which he insisted had never been made. And to be fair, there was a lot of...
Yeah, if you look at the predecessors, I think, was it that same year or the year before was like Forbidden Planet?
Yeah.
Which is like a kind of a hokey looking thing with a guy in a robot suit going, ah.
But yeah, a lot of that sort of 1950s stuff.
Very kitsch, very
yeah. And he just didn't want to do that. So the film itself is fantastical in a lot of ways. The discovery of alien artifacts and the suggestion that Homo sapiens were influenced by alien intelligence are basically pure fiction. There's no real reason to believe any of that sort of thing. But the rest of the film, the actual look of the film and the way it's presented sticks to what was at the time pretty good science in a lot of ways.
So film starts with early man in the desert banging on bones, and then in the background it's just a bunch of tapirs. There's just tapirs everywhere.
Yeah,
just,
is that
true to fact?
A lot of tapirs in those days. A lot of tapirs.
And some kind of wildcat. That's pretty much it. That's the whole wildlife of that part of Africa. So look, the idea that aliens have visited Earth is the stuff of many more low-budget invasion movies, both before and after 2001 was released. But the response of the scientists who make the discovery is pretty rational. They don't panic and they don't sort of get the army out or anything like that. They're really curious. And though in the film version of the year 2001, the Cold War is still going on. So this film was made in 1968. So it was pretty tense at the time. But in the film year of 2001, the Cold War is still going on. So there's still sort of some tension. The Russian scientists are sort of suspicious of what the American scientists have discovered and all this sort of thing. But the lasting influence of the film itself is not just in cinema. Obviously, if you look at the special effects in this film, they were groundbreaking. They pretty much influenced every sci-fi movie that came after it. There was a lot of realism, which had been lacking.
There was also like a lot of good treatment of the whole issue of gravity and weightlessness, which you still don't get today in many science fiction films.
Yeah, well, that's it. If you look at something like Star Trek, they just walk around in deep space just as if they've got normal Earth gravity.
Yeah.
And they've got some in-story explanation for that, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Even that movie where they had to restart the sun, what was that one called?
Sunshine.
Yeah. And apparently they had like physics consultants on that, and they talked about doing a, proper anti-gravity, but the filmmakers went, too hard. There's just anti-gravity. There's just like artificial gravity when you're inside the spaceship.
Whereas, in 2001, they have this, the ship has got a spinning section which allows them to have centrifugal or centripetal force, I guess it is, making them be able to run around. It's a really amazing shot too when he's running, doing his jogging. And look, up until CGI became the most common way to make spaceships, this model making sort of stuff that they kind of pioneered in 2001 was everywhere after this film came out.
Do you remember the scene in 2001 where the scientist is on the flight to the moon and he lets go of his pen and then the pen just floats in air?
Yeah.
Do you know how they got that shot?
Yeah, I think they stuck the pen to a piece of plastic.
Of glass.
Yeah.
And then moved it around like that in 3 dimensions. So it looked like, woo!
But I mean,
and it looked incredible.
How did they do the space baby?
Well, they got this real baby and they stuck it to a sheet of glass. The interesting thing is that there's only a very limited number of special effects in 2001 compared to stuff like Star Wars, which came out almost 10 years later, which had hundreds more special effects thrown in. Although I have to admit, when I upgraded my old DVD copy to a new Blu-ray version, some of the sets in the early part of the film do look a lot more stagey on the high definition.
Yeah. That's on you, Stu.
Yeah, look, maybe I was just watching it on an old VHS tape at one point or something like that.
How do the ape costumes hold up?
No, they're still pretty good. But the technology in the film itself also had an influence on the real world in a number of ways by introducing concepts that kind of hadn't been thought about before. So the tablet computer revolution has ties to devices used in this film. And it was that the film was even mentioned in court when Apple tried to claim that they invented the tablet computer. They invented the iPad, and the people that they were trying to prevent from making their own tablets said, yeah, well, we watched this movie in 1968, and that's where we got the idea from, not from your machine. Obviously, the ones in the film didn't work. They were just props. So, you know, to make an actual working one is a bit of a jump in technology. But, you know, the concept itself is what made people think of doing this in the first place. Another idea that caught people's imagination was the idea of artificial intelligence. In the film, it's represented by a supercomputer who accompanies the astronauts on their mission to Jupiter and basically controls all of the functions of their ship. So if you kind of think of that in terms of AI helpers like Apple's Siri, or Samsung has one called Bixby, and there's a bunch of other different ones. Alexa is another one.
Cortana. But
they're all influenced by Hal's manner in the film. And if you ask Siri to open the pod bay doors, she responds that she can't do that. But yeah, so the idea that the AI can actually take everything over is a bit crazy. The laws of robotics and that sort of thing, you can't really confuse an AI to the point where it'll go on a murderous binge.
Yeah, but what if there's like an alien artifact out there? Who knows?
That is true.
And you know, Hal was putting the mission before the astronauts, right? He was
that's
putting
right.
the mission
first.
So it was like a programming error.
Yeah. Well, he was supposedly given conflicting instructions. Although it is tricky to figure that out from just watching the film, I've got to say. Now, in terms of real space travel, the use of AI and robotics has probably moved away from human-led missions to other planets. We don't tend to chuck people in rockets and shoot them off into various directions. We send robots instead. So the chances of, you know, having your astronaut crew killed by the robot is pretty slim if there's no humans on board to begin with. But I think probably the main influence of the film is in inspiring people to get interested in space travel and science and all of those sorts of things. The Odyssey mission to Mars was named for this film, and it was launched in 2001 and went into orbit around Mars in 2001, and it's still there. So, you know, that's sort of all the people who were working on that got together and said, hey, let's call it Odyssey because in honor of this movie. But I think, you know, we're still a way off having space hotels and moon bases, but the parts of the film that have come true are in some ways so familiar we probably don't even notice them anymore.
That's all we have time for on our special edition of Lost in Science Fiction. Thank you for joining us. Lost in Science is recorded in the studios of 3CR and broadcast around Australia on the Community Radio Network. Please get in touch with us on email at lostinsight@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter. We're on Facebook as well. Or tune in again next week when we get lost in science.
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.